Hey everyone, welcome back to my podcast. This week I have an amazing guest that I really am super excited to sit down and chat with. As you all know, I do a Visionary Voices segment here on the podcast where I feature amazing guests that are doing great work in different communities, and this is one of those people that I'm pretty sure you've heard his voice somewhere. Maybe, most likely. Well, his name is Roy Samuelson. He's an award-winning voiceover coach and audio description expert with thousands of performances to his name. Known for blending technical mastery with emotional insight, Roy helps talents and companies create immersive, accessible storytelling that connects with audiences of all abilities. His mission is simple to make sure that everyone can laugh, cry, and connect through the magic of stories. So, Roy, thank you so much for being here. I'm so super excited to chat with you.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Gabby. Thanks for making this happen today.
Of course. So, you just released a book.
I did.
Um, that's amazing.
It's so much fun, and it's been a
Yes.
nightmare and a joy.
Yeah, I'm sure that and I believe it because I've been reading your book and it's called A Voice Actor's Guide to Audio Description Performances. And it is phenomenal. It's you highlight so many amazing things. You talk about and you even speak to people like you put in interview clips that you've done, and I think that really adds such a different touch to an audiobook, because usually when you hear an audiobook, especially one like similar to yours, it's usually something that is just like straightforward and they're just like, yeah, okay, and this person said this. But to actually hear more people kind of tune into it and get their perspectives is really awesome.
Oh, thanks for saying so. Well, you were featured on my podcast on the ADNA Presents, and so it was fun to be able to look at all 200 some interviews and also see some patterns and some challenges in audio description and some things that seem to come up over and again, and maybe some things that people weren't aware of. So
Yeah,
all that went into the book.
that's amazing. So can you kind of share with everyone like what inspired this book? What kind of, pushed you to say, I really want to put something like this out there for people to learn and, understand what AD really is?
I found myself going through a lot of the same conversations, whether I was talking with audio description audiences or even facilities that create audio description, other voice talents like myself that work in audio description who are interested in working in audio description too, and also some film producers and directors who didn't even know that their own show had audio description. So there were all these different audiences, and I really found the footing when I focused on the voice actors that
Mhm.
while that's a very small world within the world of audio description, it felt like the most accessible to kind of jump off. And frankly, I had a friend who has a publishing company, and we were talking one time, and she said, I'd love to publish your book. And I said, I don't have one. And she said, well, why don't you write one?
That's amazing. Yeah, I think because you already have so much, years of experience and knowledge, and you've gone through, I feel like being in this industry, I feel like you've experienced such a different level of like the ins and outs of it. So I think having a book out for more people to read and to be like, okay, hey, I'm interested in this now. Because I think there's so many people that are genuinely trying to understand AD a lot more than they already do. I think people have a very, at least in what I've seen, I feel like people think, oh, this thing is just here for a blind person. When it's like, I think multiple people, you've even talked about this in your book. It's not just, yes, it's obviously designed for blind people to get a better, to be able to view movies and TV shows and films and have an accessible experience. But I think everybody can in some way or shape benefit from audio description.
Hmm. Well put. I mean, that's a whole great concept that you had. I'm curious about your own interest in the book and your own understanding, because you bring a lot of experience yourself, both as an audience member and someone who's worked in audio description. So it means a lot to me to hear that that's resonating with you.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something in your book about how, you know, audio description can really connect people, right? Like we, as an audience member myself, and also someone who is interested in audio description as just what something I would love to do more of. I think I've seen even funny story, like my brother, when I'm with him and we're watching a show, he will put on audio description. Like he doesn't even think about it. He just does it. And
Uh-huh.
that to me shows like I'm not just doing this because you're my sister and you can't see. I'm doing this because I want you to enjoy whatever this is we're about to sit down and watch.
Mm.
And that, I think, for blind people everywhere that have people like that in their lives that are just enabling audio description on these platforms, these streaming services for them immediately when watching something together, I think it really just it kind of impacts you in a different way because I don't feel like oftentimes there's sighted people in my life that are that open and comfortable with it. You know, they've kind of like been like, "Oh, I don't understand what it is." And of course, me, I try to educate everybody with as many things as I possibly can, but when he does stuff like that, I'm just like, "Whoa, like I think the first time he did it, I was shocked, right? Because we sat there and watched the whole movie with the audio description, and he's like, I'm learning something from this too. You know, I'm always trying to, I'm always trying to like educate him on like accessibility and things like that. So I think when you talk about the connection that we can make, um, just with the audiences and being sure that sighted and blind people can get the same experiences, you know, in a way where when you put on a show, they get the visuals of it. And then if you have audio description that's kind of monotone and not as descriptive, or it's the qualities maybe not all that, you know, all there, I think it takes away from the the story sometimes. Like I know you had an interview clip in there, in your book, and you talked about it. So I just love that you've been kind of sharing all these little tidbits of like knowledge that not just blind people can take from this, but sighted people.
I'm so glad you said that. One of my favorite parts about working with people, whether that's in a like working with someone or working for someone, or even some people that I've hired, I like to work with the win-win idea. That instead
Mhm.
of like, okay, you lose and I win, or I win and you lose,
Yeah.
or I I don't like that approach. I like the idea of let's find a way to work together so that both of us or both organizations, both groups can find something that's really great. And for that experience with your brother, it sounds like you brought awareness to him, and then that connection that you were able to have with him,
Yeah.
it's that it takes away those speed bumps, those obstacles that really aren't necessary, and to be able to take just a slight adjustment by turning on audio description, as simple as flipping that switch, that
Yeah.
now we're able to have that connection in a way that brings us literally closer together.
Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful thing. And just to, you know, I've always told you, seeing that you are one of the people I think really is representing the blind community in such an amazing way. You know, to know that there's people like you out there that are just like, this is important, this is crucial, right? Because I think one thing that's really important is to bring communities together. And oftentimes I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect when maybe from a sighted person's perspective, they're not as open to learning about the communities that are around them. Whereas for someone like yourself who is sighted, you know, you kind of stepped into this community and really kind of like got to know the people in the community, right? Whether you're working with them or you're not. You know, I think that really kind of is amazing because you're then going out to educate the people that you meet, right? And that to me is what connection is truly like supposed to be.
Oh, oh, thanks for sharing that. I don't go into too much of my personal story, but
Yeah.
that connection really has had an impact on me because I myself have been in positions where I felt disconnected, where
Hmm.
I knew I needed something, and for whatever reason, it just seemed almost impossible to get it. And
Yeah.
while like you said, I am sighted, and I recognize some of the challenges that my blind friends in the blind community are put against that just seem, it's like that one extra barrier that's totally unnecessary. So
Yeah.
really focusing on awareness and finding those ways to get rid of those speed bumps that really don't seem to help. You had mentioned quality too. That's something that obviously I'm really focused on.
Yeah, I think because listen, I've watched a couple movies and TV shows, and sometimes I feel like the audio quality from the audio description track isn't it kind of like is either too low, like I could barely hear it, or the movie is just like too loud and it just drowns out the audio description like narrator. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. But I still appreciate it for what it is because I think without it, I wouldn't enjoy film the way that I do now. There was a point in time where I was like, oh, I don't want to watch this because I'm not going to be able to understand what's happening. And then, of course, sometimes if you go to movies with friends, I don't want to be the person that's like, hey, can you describe to me what's happening? Like,
Yeah.
because then it takes away from them experiencing the movie or the film, right? So I think to see that there's so many people now that I feel, and you can talk about this as well from your perspective, but I feel like so many more people are really trying to dive into the AD sort of narration and performance industry and learn what that really is and how it can really impact the community that it's designed for.
I love it. It's been about 4 or 5 years since I presented at the keynote for the ACB conference,
Yes.
where I introduced what a lot of people that work in the industry do know, but a lot of people in the film industry and even in AD audiences, the multiple departments that are in audio description. You started talking about, the too low, too loud. There's an appendix that you're going to get to in the book if you haven't already,
Yeah.
weakest link, where each of these parts are all connected. And one of the things that I've really been excited about is with the ADNA, the Audio Description Network Alliance. It's a database of audio description professionals in film and TV that what we're doing is helping not only support those people in getting their credits out there, but it's also educating our audiences to understand, hey, there's multiple parts. This person is an engineer, or this person is a
Yeah.
director, or this person's casting, or this person's a voice, or this person's a writer, or this person's a producer. So there's quality control. Like each of these elements, and I just named a few, are all involved in this one experience of audio description. It's not
Yeah.
just one person. And so by naming names, I feel like that not only personalizes it, and it's like, oh, Roy Samuelson, he sounds like my ex-boyfriend. I never want to hear his song. I never want to hear an audio description. He reminds me of that horrible song where I broke up. Or, maybe someone else is like, oh, this voice is so wonderful. I love hearing it. You know, any by associating names, it's able to say, hey, I think the engineer on that show really did a full pass, and maybe they should have
Hmm.
increased it when the action was too high and made it a little softer when it was too low, so I didn't have to keep fiddling with the volume up and down. That we're giving language to help nuance what audio description quality means, and I feel like nuance has been a real thread in addition to the connection.
Yeah, for sure. To you, what do you think needs to happen for us to kind of bridge that gap that with the connection of 80 performers, connecting with each other, and then also getting them to connect with the producers and the people that are sort of in charge of creating these films and because I know you mentioned that as well in your book, is that sometimes it needs to happen for these departments to come together. And I think sometimes we don't always find that that's the case, right? So what do you think, in your opinion, needs to happen for us to kind of bridge that distance?
I'd like to start by celebrating all the great work that is happening now. When I
Yeah.
started working in audio description, I had a lot of my credits taken away and taken down because people were like,
Oh.
"Oh, that doesn't count. That's not something that you worked on." And it
Mm.
really was. I had a contract. So there's been so much growth. I think social media, I think the streaming services, and I think people actually talking about it. We've now got several award shows that are celebrating audio description. We've
Yeah.
got live television award shows that have audio description. I worked with an organization that now requires all their screeners for voting to have audio description. We've got narrators that can now qualify to join to be able to vote for the Emmys. And I worked six
Yeah.
months on that. So there's a lot of people that are working together to make this awareness grow. And so I think the best way to answer your question is obviously I'm going to say buy my book, make it a little
Well,
easy for
yes,
people.
definitely.
But more than that, it's about getting together and connecting and learning. There's a Facebook group. I know Facebook sometimes is considered passé. We've got several thousand people that are discussing the nuance of audio description and some really lively conversations. So people are
Yeah.
coming together, and I feel like that. Going back to that win-win approach, that by really looking at it not as, oh, they're the enemy and we're the righteous hero, but
Right.
finding ways to say, hey, it seems like there's some gaps in our knowledge here. Let's come together. Where are you stuck and how can we support? And also, hey, I'm stuck here and here's something that I'm going to need some accessibility and here's a way to do it. So there's all sorts of ways to come together, and I feel like each of these initiatives, you doing this podcast, the many people that are really promoting audio description in unique ways, by billboarding those success stories, by showing off and putting the spotlight on in the best way possible. Hey, look at this. Look at something that someone's doing in audio description that hasn't been done before. And what great approach that starts to spill over and mushroom in some really beautiful ways.
I think that was amazing, and just like how you put that is really great because first of all, that group is awesome. I am a part of that group, and I love that Facebook group. So I think for anybody that's interested and you just want to learn what AD is and really kind of get a better understanding, or if you are a voiceover, you do voiceover work or anything like that, I think it is a great place to be. There's always great conversations happening there. Um, yeah, I think connection is amazing, and it's something that I think definitely needs to happen more. And I love that you said just kind of everybody coming together and taking that initiative to connect with people that maybe they don't work with usually in a department. Um, so yeah, so Roy, what just so everybody knows, what kind of got you inspired to start doing AD performance, and how did you get your start?
Oh, wonderful. This is fun. I'm a voice actor. So
Yeah.
I've been working in voice acting for quite a while. And one of the first real solid experiences I had that got things going was a workout group. And this was before there were virtual opportunities. But I went to a place in Santa Monica with a bunch of other voice actors. And, I had these really high expectations, Gabby, of, oh, I'm going to meet an agent. I'm going to get
Yeah.
good and get my skills built up. And I'm going to meet a director or a casting director and I'm going to get a job. And I did meet a lot of agents and I met a lot of casting directors. But the work that came to me was through those relationships, through the voice actors that I was doing the workouts through, that I had real connections with people. I didn't set out to be like, oh, I want you to get me a job, but just by being friends with people, it's like, hey, there's this opportunity. I think you and I
Yeah.
worked together because we were introduced together by a mutual friend, that
Yeah.
these kinds of connections came not through what I thought. And then the other thing was doing a workout of actually a writers group that had a bunch of produced writers for film and TV that would bring in 25 pages of their scripts, and we did ice cold readings. So they'd throw a script in my face and say, get on stage. And we were really focused on story. I brought my best performance, but it wasn't about how great my performance was. It was about how much each of us supported the story. And that was reflected in the feedback. So
Yeah.
again, through connections, through that writers group, a really dear friend of mine introduced me to an audition for audio description. And I brought my full voiceover arsenal of the best skills I had at the time to that audition. And I noticed that that company was doing really well. And there were some other companies that weren't necessarily focused on bringing the best AD possible. And that was a
Mhm.
disconnect for me.
Wow. So, if you were to give advice to anybody out there that is listening, that's like, this is something I really want to get into. If they don't right now have the connections or know anybody that might be able to kind of guide them, what advice would you give to them?
Oh, that's so fun. I
This is
like.
also in his book, so
Oh, good. Well, there we go. It's in the book. Go to roysamuelson.com/book. No, this is not, you don't need the book. You don't need
yeah,
the book. What I find that people do is and this is, let me not say people, I'm going to say it personally, that I see something that I want that I don't have, and I want to go for it. And I'm a very impatient person. So I'm going to try everything that I
same.
can to, right? It's like, I want to get this done. But I want to really capture that passion and be able to say, okay, well, let me look at this and say, here's a lot of stuff that I don't know. What one step can I take towards that goal that I haven't taken yet that's going to get me a little closer? And I'm not saying a lot closer, like all of a sudden, I want to win a audio description award for the Emmys, which doesn't exist yet, I hope. But the idea is that let's make a small step towards that goal. It's listening to this podcast. Maybe someone's going to be going to feel like joining the audio description discussion group on Facebook to say, I wonder what that's about, or maybe they know someone. Maybe there's a local theater that offers audio description and they can call that theater and ask. Maybe there's some resources online. The Audio Description Project itself, adp.acb.org, that's the American Council of the Blind, has an audio description project that lists so many resources that exploring and playfully coming from curiosity, that those steps are going to lead to more steps and going to lead to more steps.
Yeah, I agree. I think again, connection is really crucial, but I think also knowing that if there's a goal that, like Roy said, that you're working towards, that you know this is something you want to do, I think, like you said, being okay with taking those little steps to kind of lead you to the next to that bigger step, right? So
A process for me.
yeah.
I kind of get stuck in one and done thinking, or it's like I've got this big project. But
Yeah,
if I'm looking at exercising, it's doing those daily exercises and stretches. It's not like, oh, I spend a whole weekend in boot camp and now I'm able to go in a I don't know, bodybuilding championship. That doesn't work. It's those little steps.
yeah, for sure. I know you talked about in your book as well some of the things where industries and companies either aren't as open to discussing or even, putting audio description into their work. So what do you think needs to happen in order for more industries to begin discussing, learning, and even sort of understanding the importance of AD and including it in their film, their movies, their TV?
I love that question. Audio description is part of storytelling. It is an accessibility. It's also storytelling. The With story, there is no perfect story. There is no, oh, here's this story that now, obviously Pixar always does perfect stories, but my point is that we've got a process for evolving storytelling. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be lessons made. There's going to be, there's going to be mistakes made. There's going to be lessons learned. There's going to be ways to constantly continue that learning. And I feel like the industry does strive for excellence. That we've
Mhm.
tried this experiment of how cheap we can make it. And, specifically on the audience side, that doesn't work. So if that approach of, hey, we can't make it any cheaper, it's not going to come to the point where, someone who works in audio description is going to be paying a client. I hope it doesn't
Right.
come to that. But if that isn't working, then maybe instead of just reaching the bare minimum, we can start looking for opportunities to expand reach, to be able to say, hey, look, here's a whole segment of the population that hasn't seen your show. And audio description can work for blind audiences. And then people automatically flinch. It's like, how can a blind person watch TV? And then
Right.
that's a whole conversation.
Yeah. I've gotten that question so many times. They're like, "Oh,
Right.
did you see the new Spider-Man movie?"
Hmm.
No. What do you mean? You can't see?
Oh, it's so frustrating.
I'm just like, really? Like, we live in 2024. There is I feel like at this point so many things are possible. But I think it goes back to educating and just also taking that initiative. Um Now I know as an audience member, a blind audience member myself, who enjoys a good movie and a good TV show that has AD built into it, the amount of times that I've clicked on something to go watch it and I've been like, there's no audio description. I've
Oh,
just lost interest immediately. I'm like, okay.
yeah.
Um, but do you think in how can blind audience members sort of get involved with AD and just sort of the process a lot more aside from, you know, coming into this industry? If you're just an audience member who enjoys good audio description, what do you think would be like a good thing for more audience members to do to kind of get involved and use their voices to let these industries know like, hey, this is what we need?
Oh, it's a great question. I think let's start by saying that sighted audiences don't have to do this. So
Yeah.
let's acknowledge the extra effort yet again of yet another barrier that blind audiences are put in that sighted people don't have to deal with. So I want to start by acknowledging that alone creates we've got another barrier here. But to answer your question specifically, the audience members who are really engaged, that are driving content changes in the industry, it's through collaboration, it's through
Mhm.
working together. I find that, I'm not trying to say everything's kumbaya. There's a lot of challenges and problems here. There are things that need to be addressed. But by celebrating the good things that are happening, that brings attention that by working together and finding ways and really having those conversations, I think that when those conversations are happening, whether that's on the Facebook group, audio description discussion, whether it's by reading a book, whether it's by starting a collaboration with other blind people and saying, hey, let's work together and figure some things out, that it's really hard to go alone. And by finding other support networks and listening to podcasts like yours, by engaging with others, that there's got to be some things that start to pop up that maybe haven't been considered before. So let me sum it up. I think it's really collaboration. I think it's finding some pain points maybe in the industry and saying, hey, there's some solutions here. I think there's a lot of people that are watching audio description, blind people and sighted people that are noticing these things and
Mhm.
making active change. So find those people and work together.
Amazing. I think that's again that's really really crucial. Um, and I think that's very important. And I think yeah, just everything you said it was so meaningful. Always, I think you and I just always have great
We
conversations.
always
So
do.
so it's always phenomenal. I feel like I'm always learning something new. But yeah, I think you know AD has really enriched a lot of the blind community's lives in so many ways, whether it's going to a theater and seeing a play and having access to the audio description that way, or it's sitting down to watch a movie with a friend. I think in so many ways it's enriched our lives, but I do think that, and as you said, there's still always room for that improvement. So where do you kind of see AD being in the next like 5 to 10 years, if you had to think that far ahead?
I love it. Like I say in my book, I think it's chapter 5, that
Yeah,
joining forces with production, that what happens when producers and AD professionals truly collaborate. I address that in the book. It's really addressing the art of storytelling itself. And I see some popcorn examples, little pop pop, little things that are happening here and there in that direction. I think there's also the process itself of audio description and how it's made and changing. I see the streaming services are really embracing that. And with each minor change, there are new established ways. I want to use an example in the film industry that recently there's been intimacy coordinators
hmm,
that are on set. And
yeah,
that's something that didn't exist, what, like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago? Like, that is a new thing that's now just accepted as a standard. And
yeah,
it's really, it's just part of the production now. And I see that while audio description and intimacy coordinators might not seem like a parallel track, there is something really interesting about something that didn't exist before that now is recognized as just a part of the business now. And so I want to make that analogy that we can make this part of the production. And I think to answer your question also in 5 to 10 years, that there's going to be a time when a blind person and a sighted person, or blind people and sighted people can come together and not even have any of those obstacles, technologically speaking, where it's just like, hey, do you want to watch this? Yeah,
Right.
done. Yeah, click done.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think there's always going to be an advancement, and I think um I I can't remember exactly which interview clip it was. I don't know if it was Satana, who is another great voice in the industry. I'm
Hmm.
not sure if it was that interview that you did with her that was in your book, but I know you talked about AI and how because AI is on the rise, how that can also impact or, in a negative or a positive way. So do you think AI is going to benefit? Can people in this industry benefit from using AI tools, or do you think that that's going to kind of become like, okay, we have AI now, so here we go. We can just use this as a, cheaper alternative if that's the option.
I love this question. And I am a voice actor that's going to shock your audience. That we had talked earlier about nuance. There is a
Yeah.
place for AI. It's a tool, it's not a replacement. And there's so many ways that I see the conversation about AI, specifically synthetic voices, being all or nothing. That it's got to be like, oh, it's all synth voice or it's no synth voice.
Right.
Are places for it. There's a friend of mine that's a filmmaker that we discussed this a few months ago, where he was making an accessible video where he was giving instructions. He was narrating it himself, but he
Was it
wanted,
Juan?
of course, it's one.
I knew it. I knew it. I was like, it has to be Juan. I figured. He's
Yeah,
so awesome.
he's so great, and I just applaud his commitment as a
Yeah.
blind filmmaker and the content that he's putting out. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, but he had said he was curious about using synth voice, and he was very concerned and worried. And the idea in his world is that he's got an audio description track that he wants to add to his own content. And
Right.
I don't think he's being funded by Lucasfilm. I don't think that his content is like this multi-billion-dollar industry, but he's
Yeah.
got a following. And so he was trying to work within his needs to create this informational video, but he also wanted to narrate it and he also wanted audio description.
Of course.
So he used his own voice with an AI layer so that people would be able to distinguish, okay, this is the audio description and then this is the narration. And he was able to put it together. This was using synthetic voice, and it's actually not synthetic voice, it was his own voice with a
Yeah.
AI. But my point is that by using these services that are out there, whether it's the the synthetic voice or replicants or many of the other opportunities with AI, even on the engineering side, when used as a tool and not a replacement, it still maintains that human-centered connection, which is what all this content, specifically when it comes to TV and film, is all about. And a lot of my consulting work has been that nuance that the companies that I'm talking with about AI is helping them distinguish, oh, this is the use that's going to be best for our audience. It's really thinking about it in a way that isn't this slapping a layer on and running away, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think AI is, it has the potential to have an impact on people in different industries, but I especially think, seeing how it can impact this industry and how it can maybe even take it a little bit further is really exciting. And I guess a bit scary too, because you're like, I don't know. But I
Let's,
think,
let's address
yeah,
that scary too, if I could. I don't mean to interrupt you,
no,
Gabby.
you're good.
The scary part is that there are a lot of decisions being made outside of the audience's needs and wants.
Yeah,
So, let's go back to quality control. That seems to be happening a lot more often in audio description. That when blind professionals and blind audiences are included in this conversation, a lot of the mistakes that some of these companies are facing right now in making some choices in AI that have not been very positively welcomed were because that they didn't include or they didn't actually listen to the feedback from the actual audience members. So there's,
yeah.
back to this win-win opportunity by taking that step of really making sure that the audience is included. There's a lot of missteps that can be avoided.
That's very true. I think that you're right on that. And I think, like you said, just taking that feedback from the audience members. But I think you even mentioned this in your book that oftentimes you don't see sighted people having to get this involved in the work that is being put out in a visual aspect, right? Like I think, but it's also really cool because I think for the blind community, I feel that it kind of gives us more of a chance to say, hey, this is because we as the blind person, right, we kind of have the knowledge as to like, okay, maybe this would be helpful, or but I think your book really is truly going to and I'll link it down below for everybody, for sure. Yeah, I think you've mentioned so many great points on just all the aspects of AD in the industry and how people can continue to get involved and stay involved. Um, if you're a like I guess newer voice actor, what do you feel, or someone that's wanting to do AD performance? I know you kind of mentioned it earlier, but in terms of the quality, right? Like when you were getting your start in AD, what kind of worked for you that you were like, okay, this is going to help me produce the best quality, the best sounding quality? Is it getting a good microphone? Is it like, there's so many, I think, investments that one has to make right into the things that we are striving towards. So,
It's a great question. Gabby, do you play the piano?
yeah, I do.
Awesome. So, like, if someone were to come up to you after you played a piano piece and said, "Oh my gosh, that was such a great piece. You must have a great manicurist." You're like, "What? What are you talking about?" And then they'd say, like, "Well, you're using your fingers, so they must be." And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with that.
Right.
I feel like there is a really good point. There are thousands of microphones that are out there for multiple budgets. There's recording studios. Right now, I'm not in my recording studio. I'm in a really echoey living room space, and there's like this elephant print over my shoulder, and this like plank light that's changing rainbow colors, and a rainbow clock that is. Oh, by the way, my rainbow clock takes 365 days to go around the whole clock face. It's like,
What? Oh my
it's so
gosh.
cool. I
Wow.
love it. It's like, oh, today is winter and it was fall 3 months ago. Anyway, it's like, so the space that I'm in right now really isn't conducive for recording audio, but these are the technical aspects. There's also the work, and I do this in my coaching for voice talents. That
Hmm.
there's so many other things that come to acting in as a voice actor. And in
Right.
the same way that you're piano playing, you've practiced your scales, or you've practiced certain songs, or you've found ways to perform your piano playing in a way that really brings out the story of the music. And I feel like when audio description performers are recognizing how to do that, that there is this dance that happens, and it's with the content, it's with the music, it's with the scene, the dialogue that's happening before and after. That there's this synergy, this kind of like you go with the flow, and it's incredibly satisfying. And to get there, it does take skill and it does take
Yeah.
practice. In the same way we were talking earlier about going to the gym, by practicing, it makes a difference. I do some coaching workouts with actually doing audio description just to get people on their feet and feel what it feels like, and that inevitably leads to a lot of other opportunities to be like, oh, I want to play with this, or oh, I didn't know I could do this differently. So
Right.
get started. I think it's getting started.
I mean, yeah, to be honest, the last project you and I did together, I was sitting in a closet using this microphone and it was like background noise and I was like, I'm so sorry. And we sat there for like what, 3 hours, 4 hours? I
Well,
think
we
it
were working
was.
through it. What I remember of that, Gabby, is that you were committed to delivering the best you could, and you had such an openness to direction, both in how you were reading your lines and also the environment. When it comes to those kinds of experiences, having those ahead of time is obviously helpful. But what was great about our relationship in that professional environment is that
Mhm.
you were so open that you're like, oh, what about this? Does this work? And you'd make adjustments and we'd figure it out. So I was more pleased with the outcome because it turned out so great. Your voice was amazing, but also the work that we put in to make sure that you got what you needed to deliver what you could and that I was able to send to my client the best we could bring. And I think that's
Yeah.
what was so great about our collaboration.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I enjoyed just being on the call with you and Satana and just hearing you guys. Like we were joking around at one point. I still have like the clips of the audio description tracks that you guys sent over.
Uh-huh.
And I remember there was one point where Satana's like, go again, and I was like, again, and she's like, yep, and I was like, okay, and I did it, and it was just so cool, and I think that was a really awesome experience, and that's why I think always talking to you and hearing the tidbits of advice that you can give is always so fun because I've been told many times, like people that listen to this podcast, I've done some things on radio, like I've always been told, like your voice is so good, you should do more like voiceover things, and I'm like okay, like, and so I think just like you said, gaining that practice and being open minded to the experience, especially if you're starting out and maybe you don't have like a sound like a sound booth where you can sit and record and you need to use like a closet or a part of your house where you can get a little quiet and be able to record. I think it still kind of gives you the experience and the knowledge because then the more that you grow in that, the more that you're going to be like, oh, okay, so this is what can work better than, I came from sitting in the closet to having a studio set up. Like, you know what I mean? So I think all of those things, like you said, just adds to just you growing in the space. Do you prefer recording in like a company's studio or do you prefer using your at-home studio?
Oh, there's advantages to both.
Yeah.
Obviously, the convenience of no commute when I'm at home,
Yeah.
but there's also something pretty special about going into a studio that
Yeah.
being able to be with people and have those, you've heard of that water cooler conversation that
Hmm.
you can pick up on stuff that isn't really planned or part of the agenda, but it's just like, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, I should meet that person. Thanks for introducing me, or hey, my client just happens to be in the studio. And then from working at home, that also creates some opportunities in that,
Hmm.
okay, is my studio set up in the best way possible? Am I as prepared as I can be? Is there anything else that I can do? Can I, I'm regularly still coaching with people and working with engineers even today to make sure that what I'm delivering is the best it can be. And it's not there yet. I'm still working on it. And when I do work, I still want to bring the best I can, but it is also about evolution. And the mistakes that I make, I want to make sure that those are addressed. And so I'm getting mentorship, and I'm getting I'm getting support, and I'm getting training and coaching too. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Is there any other projects that you're working on aside from, promoting your book and kind of getting it out there?
The book is definitely the big focus right now, and I've got some things that I am excited about for 2025. I'm working behind the scenes on a few things that I'm very excited about, and each time that I'm getting that, like I said earlier about support, that there's a great team behind the scenes that's given their all, and I'm giving my all, and it's really exciting to see how most of the work I've done on my own, Gabby, and I've gotten as on my own, it's worked, but I'm really finding the collaboration with others is just that extra. Well, let's go back to connection. That by
Yeah.
having those connections, it's leading to some really great opportunities. So I can't wait to share more. Maybe we can have another podcast
Oh
next.
yeah, please come back anytime on this podcast. I'm sure the more that people listen and the as they, listen to this episode, they're gonna want to hear more about your projects and things you're doing. Where can people find you if they want to follow you, if they want to check out your work? Obviously, everything will be linked down below.
Excellent. So the biggest one is roysamuelson.com/book. And we've got all sorts of digital and audiobook and print versions, but also some extra explanations of what the book brings and why the book isn't just for voice actors. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm starting to post a little more frequently on there, and I've gotten some. I don't. I post to Instagram. I'm not really using Instagram, so that's relatively new. And then the best way is going to roysamuelson.com/book. And then if anyone's interested in coaching, that's roysamuelson.com/coaching.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roy. I've enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm excited to hear more about these amazing endeavors that you're going to be going on in the
Can't
next year.
wait. Thanks, Gabby. Thanks for the platform. I really appreciate talking with you, and I'm so glad that you've read the book and that we're able to talk about it.
Of course. All right, everyone. I'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.